Welcome back to Imagine If. I'm your host, as always, The Butler. In today's show, you will be hearing a paranormal story about a pro golfer. At the end of the show, I will tell you if the story was true or if it was completely made up by my creative imagination. Can you separate real from fake? Are you ready to play? Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. My name is Paul. I am a professional golfer. I have been golfing since the age of 3 years old. I'm now in my early 50s and my arthritis is starting to kick in. I usually take a lot of medication to ease the pain and make life more comfortable, but I do not think that any meds could have made me hallucinate in the story that I'm about to tell you. The story that I'm about to tell you is 100% true and simply unexplainable. I was born and raised in Salt Lake City, Utah, but I have played in golf tournaments all over the world. 20 years ago today, my daughter went missing without a trace. Her name was Tracy. She was to be picked up by her friend and her older sister from band recital. She was only 15 years old the night that she vanished without a trace. She called and texted her friend at 6 p.m. to confirm that she was being picked up. Earlier that day, her mother and I gave her her last gift. It was a gold necklace with my initials and her mother's initials as well, engraved on the back. According to her phone records, the friend arrived at 6:13 and called Tracy over 15 times before leaving. That was the last person who ever had any physical contact with her. To this day, the detectives still contact me with no new information. I really do sincerely appreciate the efforts of the detectives. However, I have still never had any real closure on my daughter's disappearance. Let's fast forward to present day. I got a request to participate in a golf tournament in London, England, and I decided to go. So the normal routine is usually check into the hotel and I am introduced to a group of caddies which I can choose from. I decided to go with a kid by the name of Sebastian. He told me that he preferred to be called Seabass, which was a pretty cool name in my opinion. So after electing him as caddy, the tournament was to take place the next day. It was a pretty hot day, but this kid definitely knew the game of golf. Any club that I asked for, he would get it without question or hesitation. He also had a skill, if you will, for finding the already hit balls. Now I'm going to be completely honest. I had a terrible performance when it came to that tournament. My game seemed to be a little bit off for whatever reason, but this kid was pretty awesome, and he seemed to want to learn the game of golf even with my poor performance. He asked me to teach him the game, and even offered to pay for me to teach him. I just kind of chuckled. Money was my least concern, but I thought it'd be kind of cool to teach him everything that I knew. I mean, this was my passion. This was my favorite sport, so why not? I agreed to do this, as long as I met with his parents first, in person of course. I invited him and his parents to dinner that night at the hotel's steak restaurant. I got there about 6 p.m. They were supposed to meet me there at 6:30 p.m. My first impression of the parents was they looked extremely well off, which was a good thing, of course. They introduced themselves. The father's name was Marco, and his wife's name was Jennifer. The dad was well groomed. He had a bow tie on and a very fine black suit, and the mother looked beautiful. She had these gorgeous diamond earrings along with a beautiful white dress. And oh my God, the diamond ring on her hand had to be the size of a quarter. We chatted for a little bit and I got to know the parents, and they seemed to be pretty awesome people. As we were saying our goodbyes, planning for the next day, I shook the father's hand. I shook Marco's hand, and he had a nice strong grip, which showed a large sign of being in charge and leadership, which is definitely something I could always respect, and definitely seeing a transparency through the little boy. I then began to hug Jennifer as to say goodbye, and I noticed something looked very familiar. There was no question about it. She was wearing the necklace that I gave Tracy 20 years ago. I asked her, "Where did you get this beautiful necklace from?" She began to cry. She told me the story of how she was taken away from the United States almost 20 years ago. Marco told her to stop telling the story and pleaded with her to leave. But I definitely needed to hear the end of the story. She told me that she was taken captive, kidnapped, and used for a sex slave for over 4 years in Miami, Florida, before being taken overseas. Before she could tell me any more, I hugged her as tight as I possibly could and told her that I was Paul. I was her father. She escaped that terrible life before meeting Marco. She was working at a casino at the time, and Marco decided to take her out for dinner one night. They fell in love, and they've been married ever since. She changed her name completely to protect her identity, but she's safe now. I am so happy, yet I'm so confused on how we found each other, literally, with the world being as big as it is. That's our show today, guys. Thank you for tuning in. Now this is the segment of the show where I tell you if this story was real or false. If you said that this story was actually true, you're right. This story actually happened. See you guys on the next show of Real versus Fake Scary Stories.